After more than $7 billion and more than 20,000 dead or wounded U.S. troops, some of the last of our forces to leave Afghanistan might end up being Americans who are not yet born. That's according to the reporting of the Washington Post newspaper. The war in Afghanistan has already become America's longest war, and now the Washington Post reports some of America's top military commanders are talking about plans to keep U.S. forces on the ground in Afghanistan for decades to come. You may remember President Obama has canceled his previous plans to withdraw nearly all U.S. forces by next year. Right now, there are just fewer than 10,000 American troops on the ground in Afghanistan, we're told. The Washington Post reports Afghan government forces are lacking leadership and lacking the will to fight. The Taliban have been retaking territory, and al-Qaeda is still using parts of that country as a safe haven. In essence, it's an enormous mess. One senior Pentagon official tells that newspaper, quote, "What we've learned is that you can't really leave." The Post reports it could take a generation and billions more dollars and more funding to build an effective Afghan security force. It also reports American military leaders are taking into consideration the Islamic State's rise in Iraq after U.S. forces left that country. Missy Ryan is the Pentagon correspondent for the Washington Post and co-wrote this report. Missy, thank you.
Thank you.
Decades.
It's really a striking reversal for President Obama, who staked his presidency in part on ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was only in 2014 that we had him stand in the Rose Garden and promise to bring the U.S. military role in Afghanistan to an end. And since then, there's been a series of reversals of changes to the drawdown plan from Afghanistan. And now, as my colleague Greg Jaffe and I report today, U.S. military leaders are quietly talking about years or decades-long presence in Afghanistan. They think that's what will be required to help the Afghan forces be able to fend off the Taliban and this lingering al-Qaeda presence that continue to threaten not just Afghanistan, but American national security.
So not set in stone, but they're sort of wargaming this or planning for the future with a number of different possible scenarios.
Sure, that's right. I mean, obviously, it'll be up to the next president to make final decisions about future troop plans. But from a military perspective, their judgment is that the Afghan forces are nowhere near ready to take care of defending their country on their own. And, you know, they require billions of dollars of a year in outside funding. They will require the presence of perhaps thousands of foreign troops a year for the foreseeable future. And really, it's just not just to protect Afghanistan, to make sure that the kinds of threats that brought the United States to Afghanistan in 2001 don't repeat themselves.
Is there a suggestion on some level or another that all of these billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars and all of these American lives might one day in some future scenario make things better in some way, or are we just trying to keep things from just going to hell?
Well, to be fair, you know, there have been some important strides that have been made in Afghanistan. Obviously, on the military front, there really wasn't a national army in Afghanistan in 2001, and now you have a national security force that's, you know, larger than 300,000 people. The government is much more stable than it used to be. Sort of public health indicators are far better than they used to be in Afghanistan. At the same time, it's a very fragile situation still. You've got Afghanistan wedged between Pakistan and Iran. You've got a country that's severely impoverished and just doesn't have the sort of strength of institutions to withstand the kind of internal and external threats that they face.
Are they depressed about this? Surprised by this? How would you classify it? I
think that, yeah, surprised. I mean, you know, it was only last summer, last fall, where U.S. military leaders were actively planning to end the military presence in Afghanistan in line with President Obama's stated plans. And I think that they really were taken aback by the strength of the Taliban resurgence that we've seen over the last year. You know, you had the Taliban briefly seize provincial capital in northern Afghanistan. They've been able to claw back some of the territory in southern Afghanistan that was won at great cost by American and British troops during President Obama's troop surge in 2011. And I think that they didn't expect things to be where they stand at this stage. That said, you know, it's not the same kind of threat that you're seeing against the Islamic State in Iraq. You know, the Taliban has not been able to hold and maintain control over large swaths of the country like we've seen in Iraq. But it's just really, I mean, Iraq has been, I think, a really important lesson for many of our military commanders just to see the potential drawbacks of a full American withdrawal.
Missy Ryan from the Washington Post, who works the Pentagon, along with our own Jennifer Griffin. Missy, it's great to see you, but if you keep watching the wrong television channel up there, you're all going to get all weird. You know that. She probably can't see from the back of her head, but we can all see it. You better watch it over there.